everybody, welcome to Stonx Music. My name's Ollie and today we're going to be having a look at Vinyl Distortion in this deep dive episode. Let's go! Right, so here we are back in the Ableton Manual. Let's jump right in and see what they've got to say about it. The vinyl distortion effect emulates some of the typical distortions that occur on vinyl records during playback. These distortions are caused by the geometric relationships between the needle and the recorded groove. The effect also features a crackle generator for adding noisy artifacts. The tracing model section adds even harmonic distortion to the input signal. Adjust the amount of distortion with the drive knob or click and drag vertically in the tracing model XY display. To adjust the distortion's frequency or colour, drag horizontally in the XY display or double click on the frequency field and type in a value. Holding the Alt-PC, Alt-Mac modifier while dragging vertically in the XY display changes the frequency band's Q or bandwidth. The pinch effects section adds odd harmonics to the input signal. These distortions typically occur 180 degrees out of phase, creating a richer stereo image. The pinch effect has the same control as the tracing model, but generates a rather different sound. The drive control increases or decreases the overall distortion amount created by both the tracing model and pinch. There are two distortion modes, soft and hard. The soft mode simulates the sound of a dub plate, while hard mode is more like that of a standard vinyl record. The stereo mono switch determines whether the pinch distortion occurs in stereo or mono. Set it to stereo for realistic simulation of vinyl distortions. The crackle section adds noise to the signal, with noise density set by the density control. The volume control adjusts the amount of gain applied to the noise. So this is quite an old effect here, but it has quite a few kind of cool uses. It's a very unique kind of distortion. So let's jump into Ableton and see what we can do with it. Right, so here we are back in Ableton. I've got this little bit here that I've just been working on, trying to showcase a few different ways that I use vinyl distortion. Let's have a little listen and then we'll have a breakdown and see what's going on. So nice crunchy drums, some nice distorted bass as always. Let's jump in and see what we're doing. So up at the top here, let me solo the drums. So what I'm doing here is I have the vinyl distortion with the crackle turned up slightly. So if I turn this gate off, you hear those pops and clicks being added, and when we stop pressing play, all of that background noise is still there. So let me just see that back to a volume I liked. You can still hear it though in the background. So I've got this gate after it and I'm sidechaining it to its own channel. So now this is only going to come through when the drums are playing. So if you ever listen now, and it's really subtle, but it should just add a bit of that pop and click to those drums and just give it a bit more texture. We've also got a little bit of distortion going on here, so if you listen without, it's not much because we have both of these down near the bottom, but we're just adding a little bit of warmth. It's kind of a bit of a subtle version of saturator. It's just a little bit of crackle, a little bit of fuzz. But putting this gate on afterwards is just a really nice way to have this crackle going. And you can see here it's constantly blurting stuff out. But with this gate, you have a nice bit of control over that. Right, so next up we've got the basses. And as you can see here, I've got a group with 3 different MIDI channels in it. Each of them are slight variations of the different instrument, and our sub down here. All of them grouped together with one big vinyl distortion with a big boost down here. So let's have a listen to all of this on. It's a nice, fuzzy, warm, big bass. So let's turn this vinyl distortion off and listen to the lot together. So this one down here is really bringing out some nice harmonics, and this is the odd harmonics, which is usually the more obvious of the two, so we can listen with this on and off. So I brought that all the way up and went, oh, I love it, and then backed it off a bit as you go. for a nice bit of control. So let's jump into the first instrument. We've got this here, and let me just play it all together for you. It's kind of a real high, fuzzy kind of thing going on. So if you turn off all of these effects, we see what we've got to start with. So we've just started off with a really basic Reese, really. We've got our first operator here, which is a saw wave and another saw wave with a slight difference on the fine tune to give it that wobble. And then I've added another one here where I just kind of touched where I felt it needed a bit more frequency. So we've got this. And at the bottom here, I've got a sine wave, and that's just to add in a sub, even though we ended up reinforcing the sub, just a bit more pure. And you can't hear it much, but I added that after doing all the processing, and I find this way you can really just add those effects that you're lacking. And then we've got these two high here, which is the same thing, transpose up by 12, one panned left, one panned right, and I've just messed with the tone on both of these so they are slightly different. So we've got this. So altogether, this is our sound. It's not a particularly big fat sound, but this is what does the majority of the work, all of our effects afterwards. So let's have a little look what's going on. First up, we've got this Vinyl Distortion. And I've got both of these cranked quite high, but I've turned the drive down. So if I turn the drive up, and it's a technique we've talked about before, just slowly building up frequency. So after the Vinyl Distortion, I've got a little saturator just with soft clip on. That just helps round it off a bit. After that, I'm ramming it through a glue compressor. It's not doing much, but it's just taming those peaks. And then into another Vinyl Distortion. And again, it's just subtly adding little bits of drive. Next we go into an auto filter. I usually use Max for Live, but just to make it more compatible for you guys, I've done it with the inbuilt LFO. So this is just moving that up and down like this. Next up, we've got an amp. Just to add a bit more distortion again. Then going into overdrive, because I needed a bit more in a particular place, so I moved the band around where I wanted it. Into a drum bus, just for a bit of crunchy, squishy. Into a glue compressor again, for more crunchy, squishy. And then we've got our reverb, which is gated. So the reverb cuts off when the note stops playing. And then we have a phaser, a flanger, another auto filter moving around, glue compressor, squish it all together again. And then here we've got a little effect I made where we are absolutely ramming up the stereo image of the sides. And if we grab spectrum here, you can really see what's going on. So this side is pushing that correlation meter all the way over to the left. So if you look at the dry signal, then we look at the side signal, that's all stereo content. So I've split it so I've got the sides and our dry. Next we've got an OTT, just because it's what we do, and I've got the lower mount on there, followed by a delay, very short delay time just to give it this kind of metallic-y feel. Glue compressor again. And this is a really just broken, distorted sound. And then we've got our sidechain, which I'm not using to make room for the kick. I'm using it as a creative expression to really get that pump. After that, we've got a bit more chorus just to soften the highs. Multiband, taming those highs again. And an EQ8, just doing some aliasing at the bottom, cutting out some low end we don't need. And that's just a little cut, making room for this instrument over here. So we've got... So by the time I was done with that, it ended up being quite a thin sound, but it's a nice layer. So I've duplicated that. I've got all the same effects here, and I just grabbed in this boom sound. So together we have a nice... Starts filling in that sound. And at the end here we have my sub, which is pretty much the sub I use for everything. I've been tweaking it for a long time, and that sounds like this. And I haven't put that through the sidechain, so that should persist throughout the whole thing. So altogether we're left with this sound, without the vinyl distortion. I felt that that's still kind of too high up here. I needed to bring it in low. So the vinyl distortion really helps there, just boosting this low odd harmonics. That brings it real back in here. And if you have a look at the span now, it's got a nice downward slope and correlation meters mostly on the right side. Lastly, we have this little operator, which is just a little plunky sound. And that is just a square wave, a saw wave, and a sine wave. Just really short little hits. And then we're going into a delay, auto filter removing some of the low end, compressor, saturator, phaser to move around that high end, reverb to give it a bit of space, cutting the lows out of the reverb there, auto filter cutting out more of those lows again. And then we have our vinyl distortion, giving it a nice bit of warmth. So let's listen to everything without the vinyl distortion. And with. So I'm using it like the saturator there, just to kind of add some of this harmonic content, add these frequencies. If I grab our span and we look at the before and after, again, it's going to be subtle on the span. You see maybe a little boost, kind of boost those highs a bit. But that really is just giving a nice bit of saturation and helping that operator to pop out. Then lastly, we've got one on the master. Now this one is, I don't really think doing much at all, but it is adding some coloration. So let's have a listen again to everything before and after. Just adding a little bit of warmth there. So that's vinyl distortion pretty much. The crackle is really nice if you can tame it, which I would say to do by using a gate, and then you can gate it to your channel. We'll turn this one back on here for our crackle. And most of the character of this bass is coming from this vinyl distortion. Alright everyone, that'll do it for this episode of Deep Dive. Hopefully you've learned a thing or two about saturator. As I say, the crackle's really nice if you can tame it, but it's really about getting that nice warm distortion on those odd frequencies. For me, that really helps me get some grunt into my basses, and same as the saturator, I'll be using it just to kind of pop out some things in the mix, get some extra harmonics going on some of these cleaner instruments just to help them kind of gel. So don't forget, project files available in the description if you want to get your hands on that. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of these deep dive videos, and I'll catch up with you a lot next time. Bye!